identified this police station in New York City as being one of more than 100 police stations that are being operated by the CCP in 53 countries.
Told Congress that the Pentagon's 2024 budget request will help the country prepare for a future war with China. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic, and we are Unapologetically Outspoken. Hey everybody, welcome to our Freedom Friday. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard this past Monday, the FBI arrested two people on charges of operating a secret Chinese Communist Party police station in New York City. And they arrested these people because they were trying to track down and silence Chinese dissidents living in the United States. So the two individuals have been identified as 61-year-old Jinwang Liu and 59-year-old Chen Jinping. And apparently they were caught trying to destroy evidence of their conspiracy when they found out that they were being investigated by the FBI. So according to an article that I read in the Epoch Times, in addition to charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice, court documents are alleging that Liu had been conducting work for the CCP within the United States since at least 2015. And he's had this long-standing relationship of trust with the CCP, and apparently was asked by Xi Jinping to organize counter-protests when there were demonstrations from a spiritual group called Falun Gong, which apparently is a group that has been heavily persecuted in China since 1999. So the accusation is that Liu was directed by the Chinese consulate in New York to put articles in the newspapers targeting Falun Gong, but Liu's claiming he never did that. However, he did admit to helping bring hundreds of members from his association to Washington on buses from various locations, and that each member was given $60 from the consulate. And he apparently also admitted to coordinating threats of violence against a Chinese dissident and his family in an attempt to force him to return to China to be arrested by the CCP. And according to the U.S. District Attorney's Office, he also hired another agent to track down a U.S. resident on U.S. soil in order to silence them on behalf of the regime to protect the CCP's authoritarian worldview. So I also read an article this past Wednesday in Politico about a Spain-based nonprofit advocacy organization called Safeguard Defenders. And this organization has identified this police station in New York City as being one of more than 100 police stations that are being operated by the CCP in 53 countries. They identified a second police station that was in an unidentified location in New York, one in Los Angeles, 4 in Toronto, Canada, 3 in Vancouver, Canada, 2 more in Montreal, Canada, and then other locations in London, Rome, and Tokyo. And then another article I read in the American Military News that was also released on Wednesday revealed that Safeguard also identified secret police stations in San Francisco, in Houston, and in cities within Nebraska and Minnesota. So clearly this is happening all over the United States. And when Safeguard Defenders first published their data from China's Ministry of Public Security, it was back in September of last year. And they revealed that Beijing had placed their, quote, first batch of 30 overseas police stations in 25 cities in 21 countries. And then by December, that number had grown in just a few months to more than 100 in countries including the United States, Canada, Nigeria, Japan, Argentina, and Spain. And most of these police stations are reportedly being placed inside what appear to be like legitimate businesses or organizations that basically provide a front for their operations. And this Politico article was describing them as like providing civilian cover for Chinese government operations that are deemed, quote, too risky for official Chinese diplomats to pull off. And the article also mentioned that, members of the local communities who are aware that these police stations exist are hesitant to contact authorities because they fear that the CCP is going to retaliate against them and their families. So, of course, the CCP is denying these accusations, and they are claiming that these locations are, quote, service centers that are being operated for Chinese people who are living abroad so that they can do things like get their driver's licenses renewed or get physical checkups. And this article I read was also talking about how Chinese law enforcement actually has a legal foothold in some countries, like in Italy, Croatia, and Serbia. They are legally allowed to be there. But there are at least 5 other countries that have confirmed that there's police stations that are in violation of laws that bar the activities of foreign police personnel being inside their borders. And no surprise, the United States is one of them. So in response to the arrests of these 2 men on Monday, U.S. District Attorney Breon Peace stated, quote, this prosecution reveals the Chinese government's flagrant violation of our nation's sovereignty by establishing a secret police station in the middle of New York City. Just imagine the NYPD opening an undeclared secret police station in Beijing. So, like, we really had no idea anything was happening, right? But then I read an article in the National Review that also came out Wednesday. And this article claimed that New York Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul and New York Mayor Eric Adams both received thousands of dollars in campaign donations from the people who allegedly set up these secret CCP police stations in Lower Manhattan. And the article said that, quote, through campaign contributions and banquet dinners honoring politicians, people with ties to the Chinese police stations gained access to New York's political class. So apparently, one of the men who was arrested, Jin Wang Liu, who goes by the name of Harry, and then another guy named Zhang Shun Liu, who is called Jimmy or James. These guys were both leaders of the America Chang Li Association, which is a nonprofit group that donated over $30,000 to leading New York political figures since the early 2000s. And there are a slew of public records available to prove these donations. So in December of 2021, Jimmy Liu donated $2,500 to Hochul when she was doing her first run for governor. And then throughout 2019 and 2021, he also donated several times to Adams when he was the president of something called the Brooklyn Borough. And then he donated another $2,500 to Adams' mayoral campaign in 2021. And I guess since this broke, like, they were trying to reach Hochul and Adams for comment. So Hochul couldn't be reached, but apparently a spokesperson for Mayor Adams said that he's going to return the money. Like, we've seen this before, Stephanie. So there's this laundry list of liberal politicians who have received donations from these 2 gentlemen, including several prior mayoral candidates, New York State Assembly members, DNC committee members, New York City Council members, and New York comptroller candidates. And this dates back to 2006. So here's my question, Stephanie. Has any of this really been a secret? I mean, we talked about this months ago, literally 3-4 months ago. We did a podcast where we talked about how there were several CCP police stations across the country. And we specifically referred to this one in New York City. And now there's evidence about a shit ton of these stations, basically like all over the world. And yet the DOJ is acting like this just came to light. And honestly, I feel like this is just another bullshit move by the left and the Biden administration to pretend that they haven't been aware of China's surveillance program that has clearly been operating here in the United States for a very long time.
Well, yeah, and shout out to you. You knew about it a long time ago, months ago. And we're supposed to believe that the US government, that these intelligence agencies had no idea. And I think it's hilarious that just the timing of all of this, because you look at what the New York City DA is doing to Trump for mismanaging campaign funds. Meanwhile, his very own mayor is taking money from the CCP, basically. Like, unfreaking real. Just when I think I can't be surprised anymore, they fucking surprise me with their bullshit, okay? But no, it hasn't been a secret. And, you know, you ask a very important question. Why now? And, you know, I came across this article from ABC News that said, quote, China's military has declared it is ready to fight after completing 3 days of large-scale combat exercises around Taiwan that simulated sealing off the island in response to the Taiwanese president's trip to the U.S. So tensions are definitely escalating. And I don't know, maybe the Biden administration is finally like taking the Chinese threat seriously and finally looking at it as opposed to looking at climate change for once. But that's all I can think of for why it would be now.
Well, conveniently enough, the exact same day that these two men were arrested, the DOJ announced that they're charging 40 officers from China's Ministry of Public Security and then two employees of the Cyberspace Administration of China with conspiring to transmit interstate threats and a coordinated harassment campaign against Chinese people living in New York City and other areas across the US who have political views in opposition to the CCPs. So these MPS officers are apparently part of an elite task force in China called the 912 Special Project Working Group. And allegedly, this is a group that was created to target and silence Chinese dissidents on a global scale. And the group apparently created like thousands of fake social media accounts on US platforms like Twitter, and they use them to harass and intimidate people who advocate for democracy in China. And they use social media like US social media sites. We're not talking about TikTok, Chinese owned sites. We're talking about US sites to spread this CCP propaganda and disinformation to undermine, US national security and election integrity. And they're also being accused of attempting to recruit US citizens to act as like agents of the regime by encouraging them to disseminate online propaganda. So the FBI acting assistant director, Kurt Ronau, he stated, quote, China's Ministry of Public Security used operatives to target people of Chinese descent who had the courage to speak out against the Chinese Communist Party, in one case by covertly spreading propaganda to undermine confidence in our democratic processes, and in another by suppressing U.S. video conferencing users' free speech. We aren't going to tolerate CCP repression, its efforts to threaten, harass, and intimidate people here in the United States. The FBI will continue to confront the Chinese government's efforts to violate our laws and repress the rights and freedoms of people in our country. And then Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olson stated, quote, these cases demonstrate the lengths the Chinese government will go to silence and harass U.S. persons who exercise their fundamental rights to speak out against oppression, including by unlawfully exploiting a U.S.-based technology company. These actions violate our laws and are an affront to our democratic values and basic human rights. And quite frankly, now I'm talking from myself, I almost started laughing as I was just reading that quote. And when I initially read them, I actually laughed out loud because Stephanie, is this fucking hypocrisy or what? Like, this is exactly what the Biden administration has been doing to Americans, silencing proud and patriotic Americans, calling us threats to democracy and domestic terrorists, like arresting parents who want to stand up for their kids, censoring free speech on social media, spreading disinformation, conducting election fraud, and consistently lying to the American public.
Well, that's the left. It's total hypocrisy. And remember, like we've already stated, that if they accuse the right of doing something, it means it's because they're actually really doing it. Kind of like when they kept accusing Trump of Russia collusion, but then it turned out it was the Clinton campaign that was like colluding with Russians. And then how like now the real collusion is Biden and his corrupt family doing business with China and Ukraine, which, by the way, while, all of this is going on with Trump's arrest, the investigation into the Biden's family business dealings with China is getting crazier by the day. And of course, the mainstream news is like totally avoiding it. And so far, the House Oversight Committee revealed that there are now 9 Biden family members that have received millions of dollars from China, according to bank records. And all along, we knew about Hunter Biden and then Joe Biden's sketchy brother. But apparently, the banks have been cooperating with Congress, which I was really surprised about that. And so far, they've looked at like one suspicious activity report. There's 150. So who knows what's going to turn up next? But so far, they have 9 Biden family members that have taken money and don't have a business. Like it's going to an LLC and then being divided to these family members, but none of these family members have a business that would deal with China. So none of it's making sense. And it's getting to the point where these agencies can't keep denying that Biden is not compromised. Like clearly he is. And just look at where we are as a country right now. Like everyone was so worried that Trump was going to, get us into a nuclear war. But then Biden comes in and now we're in a proxy war with Russia. We're giving billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine, pissing off our allies and losing them. And the entire world is starting to turn against us, including Saudi Arabia and now our ally, France. And it looks like we could be in war with China over Taiwan very soon. So, again, like the whole Trump thing has been one big distraction while all of these other really big news stories are going on in the background. So, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, told Congress that the Pentagon's 2024 budget request will help the country prepare for a future war with China. They want a 40% increase in the budget to include more towards the Pacific Deterrence Initiative.
Okay, wait, this is the same military that cannot account for, what was it, 60% of their budget
Yeah.
during the last audit they had, which out of 5 audits, they failed 5?
Yeah. And now they want a 40% increase. Like, give me a fucking break. And, it's not just the government, like investors are now taking this threat of war very seriously too. So Warren Buffett just sold 86% of his stock, which is billions of dollars. It's like almost $4 billion of Taiwan Semiconductor, which is the largest chip manufacturer in the world. And when he asked why he did it in an interview, he could not give a clear answer. And he was like squirming and making no sense and acting very strange. And first he was like, well, there's a potential for like seismic action in that area. And then right away it was like he backed off and he's like, oh, but that's probably a low probability. And it was just, the whole thing was very weird because he's normally very like clear and straightforward and to the point. And this guy's a master of the market. So when he's acting dodgy and he's pulling 86% of his stock out in a company that he just invested in, like, that he is fully aware of something that maybe the rest of us don't know yet. And what makes it even more strange is right after this, Senator Tuberville, who sits on the Committee of Armed Services, purchased put contracts on the same Taiwan Semiconductor company, which basically means you're betting against a company. So this senator is definitely privy to classified military information. So if I were a betting person, I'd bet that they know China's invading Taiwan very soon. And one of the main reasons why China wants Taiwan, I mean, there's like a whole history there, but a big reason is for that semiconductor plant. So like, I didn't understand this until I did the research, but these semiconductors, what they produce, it goes into everything all over the world, everything from your phone to military weapons. So whoever has control of this plant has an enormous amount of world power. And clearly, like, the US doesn't want to give that up easily, and China wants to go after it. So it just puts the US and China in this like frightening situation. And the DOJ is all of a sudden taking action on these Chinese police stations. And maybe it's because of like the fact that China is pretty much coming out and saying that they're about to invade Taiwan. And maybe the US is finally going to get tough with China like they should have done from the beginning. And then you also have China conducting military drills around Taiwan, and Biden continually saying that the US is going to defend Taiwan. And China stated that the US is playing with fire for selling weapons to Taiwan at the G7. And then you have French President Macron, which is all over the news. Well, not all over the news, all over social media right now. And he's urging his European counterparts to stay neutral and not to follow the US lead. So here our long-term ally France is like not going to stand by us when it comes to China. So thanks to our dementia-ridden president, our allies are starting to back off, and we're on the verge of war with another big fucking nuclear country. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
So I think that there's just a lot of components right now, and the US and China, like, it's getting heated, and I think we can expect to see a lot more tension build in the coming months, maybe even in the coming weeks. So we'll have to keep everyone posted on this, Tara, but I think we got to stay away from all the distractions of the mainstream media and focus on these big issues that are really happening.
Yeah, because none of what you just talked about is in the mainstream media at all.
No, of course not. Everything they say is either a distraction or a big fat lie. And that's really why we are doing this podcast, because we're trying to figure out the stuff that people should really know, because it's like we're just constantly being lied to. And I'm sick and tired of it. And I really hope that we do not go to war with China, because they have a huge fucking military and they have way more weaponry than we have, way more advanced technology. So, it'll be interesting. I don't think, from everything that I read, it sounds like China isn't going to just go and like bomb Taiwan and like take over that way. They're probably going to try to hurt them economically, doing something with the market. So we'll see how it goes. It's a very slippery slope. And the thing that gives me a lot of, I guess, peace, like the bright side of things, is they're going to be careful with waging a full-blown war with the US, because think about how much we get from China. And if we went to war with them, like their economy would collapse and the whole world economy would start to collapse. So there's a lot of things they have to think of. It's not like we can just go to full-on war. So I'm a little optimistic from that perspective, but it's also terrifying when you have two huge military powers, China and Russia, that are at odds with us, and our allies are dropping like flies.
Right. And then what? Putin just went to the Ukraine, or is going to the Ukraine?
Oh, I don't even know. I missed that.
Yeah. I
For
think
peace talks or what?
I wish I knew more details. I mean, this is something we're going to have to look into, but I saw something yesterday that Putin was going to Ukraine. So I'm curious to see what is going to develop out of that.
Well, what I did hear about Ukraine is that they've still been fucking buying energy from Russia. They're
Yeah.
at war with Russia and they are buying from Russia. Like, hello? I mean, what is going on here? So again, it's like we are constantly being lied to. So we'll do some research on that and bring that to you next week. But yeah, just remember, like, China's not going to be stupid. They're in it for the long haul. And I don't think there's going to be this like massive war that's going to melt their economy. I think they're going to be strategic and they're going to do some things, but we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. I just wish we had a president that knew what the fuck was going on leading us right now. That'd make me feel a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, an actual leader in office.
Just someone that knows what day of the week it is would be great. I mean, at this point. So, all right. Well, that is our Freedom Friday episode. And everyone have a great weekend. And we'll be back here on Monday with some motivation and manifestation for you guys. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you get our latest episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you could, please rate and review the show. We are going to be reading every single review, and I would love it if you hopped over to Instagram at Unapologetically Outspoken and say hi. We want to see who's out there and start a conversation, plus get all of the topics that you want us to talk about next. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.